Okay, so welcome to this month's call. I'm very excited about this topic because I just love this book. It's more marked up than any other book I've probably ever owned in terms of, you know, lines I've underlined, little stars I've put, and then little bookmarks I put at the top to remind me to go back
Mhm.
on a regular basis. Um, but it's not one that's really well known as far as a leadership book. It's really, while it is for leaders in an organization, it's very much for entrepreneurs. And the author of it, Dusan Jukic, was coached by a fellow named Steve Hardison, who is called the ultimate coach. He charges, I just learned his fee is, I think it's 250,000 a year to coach with him. He has a spot for one person next year, and I think he has 80 people wanting that spot, which is why he can charge so much. He's an amazing guy. And he is the one that actually gave me permission to share a copy, the PDF version of this book. So if you're interested in receiving that, then I am happy to share that with you. Just one second. I want to make sure we are recording. Okay. So I can send you the PDF of that if you don't already have it. But one of the things I wanted to give as an overview of the book is what he means by straight line, because he contrasts this with, going in circles, because a lot of times we aren't clear about our goals and we haven't really made the commitment to get there, or we are in a zigzag pattern. We go straight for a little while, but then we get veered off course by distractions and a lack of focus. And so the whole point of this book is really helping you see what you need to do to look at where you want to be. Interestingly, he kind of goes backwards. He wants you to look at where you want to be and then look back at where you are now and what you need to do differently, as opposed to first looking at where you are and then looking at the future and looking at it that way. So what he does, there are two things that he really focuses on. And one he calls your inner stance. Excuse me just a second. Let me make sure. Yeah. The inner stance is looking at where you're coming from. So what is the way that you live now in terms of your mental posture, the way that you see yourself in the world, and how you are currently choosing to exist or be as it relates to yourself, others, your work, or life in general. And he uses this word choice or choose a lot. And because he's trying to encourage us to realize at any given moment we can choose to be different than how we have been in the past. So that whole idea of inner stance, how are you presenting yourself, combined with what he terms distinctions, which are, he describes them as dramatic graphic opposites. In fact, he has 40 chapters in this book that are each devoted to this idea of a distinction. So it helps you identify which of these two ways of being do I identify with, and how well is that serving me, and what do I want to do to shift over to the one that's going to help me operate in a more straight line way. So that basically you're adopting what he calls power stances that are going to increase the speed at which you accomplish things and achieve the results that you've really set out for yourself. And I want to dive into some of these specific distinctions just to make them alive and real for you. But before we get into that, I just wanted to quickly ask, what do you see, if you're willing to share, when you think about where you want to be, either as a person or in your business, and where you are now, and think about what those gaps are? What do you think are some of the things that might be preventing you from being where you ideally would like to be? I know it's risky to share that.
Not so much risky, it's just thinking, thinking about it.
Well, I'll tell you this while you're thinking, this book has more questions in it than I've ever seen. And so many of them are powerful ones that you can use with your prospective clients when you're talking to them before they hire you, in addition to ones that you can use with existing clients, whether you're coaching or consulting with them. But I think, so do you have any ideas yet that you're willing to share?
Well, as you, I'll chip in or whatever. As you're probably aware, Meredith, it's my business. I've been sort of going through that change process over the last sort of year, and it's becoming a lot clearer now. So whereas before we did a lot of employee feedback was what we were getting a lot of employee surveys. I've now moved that over, and we're doing far more, or I am doing far more coaching now. But it's interesting because I've been doing some bits and pieces with LinkedIn and got this company that's helped me out with some of the previous conversations we've had regarding on LinkedIn. And it is quite interesting. I used to have a very clear idea as to what I was doing and why I was doing it when I first set up Shine. As I've got older and as my children are now all grown up, and I didn't realize, I suppose I did to an extent, but I didn't realize just how much I ran that business just to provide for my children and to give them everything they wanted. And now they don't need that anymore, I'm pleased to say. It's almost like, well, okay, so I'm in the latter years of my working life. So what do I want to be? Well, is that retired? And so I've got all of those kind of things sort of going on. There's no single clarity. So that's why I'm sort of struggling a bit just to specifically answer that question, so, what or where do I want to be? Mm-hmm. I've always been quite happy with who I am. So I mean, I'm not quite clear in my thinking yet as to where I want to be in the next sort of 3-5 years or whatever.
Okay, well, reading this book might help you gain some of that clarity.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll answer that question from a more global level if I can.
Sure, Larry.
But Dennis and Graham do not, that I lost my wife earlier this year.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. After 31 years of marriage. So I've been wrestling with these very questions on an even larger scale, thinking about who do I want to be now? Where do I want to be now? And what do I want to do now? And some of those questions at least one of them I've already answered by virtue of moving from Virginia to Henderson, Nevada. A plan that was already in place. Both of us were supposed to have made this move. And she passed away just days before our departure, literally. So I had no choice but to wrestle with some of those more quickly than others. And at the same time, of course, grieve that loss, which is still an ongoing process and will be for quite some time. So Meredith's question really hits home with me. I did virtually nothing on the business front for months until just this month. I decided I was ready to get back to it slowly. But I'm still very much, to get back to your question, Meredith, I'm still very much in the process of answering all those questions. Aside from the where do I want to be, I answered that one, at least for now, by being here in Henderson, which could not be much different than Charlottesville, Virginia, that's for sure. Much more different, I should say. But the others are still very much up in the air. So your question really resonates with me as I continue to search for the answers.
Well, I'm glad this is timely for both of you. So some of these distinctions that I'm going to share, it seems like they're going to help you think through on a personal level as well as a business level.
Right.
So let's go ahead and get into them. The first one, and by the way, some of the ones I'm sharing with you are ones that are my personal favorites. These are chapters I've gone back and read multiple times, because this productivity versus busyness. We all can have such full days, but then at the end of the day, what have you really accomplished? And so I really liked his definition of productivity, which is doing what's in front of you that will lead to the attainment of your desired outcome. And so these are a couple of great questions that he's built into that particular chapter. And by the way, these chapters are like 3 and 5 pages long. So they're, some of them are 2 pages. They're short, and it's just all meat. I think that's why I've marked up this book so much. So here are a couple of questions to ask yourself. Am I just inventing things to do to avoid or put off the necessary required actions? And I put in red some of the phrases that he uses throughout the book. And this necessary required actions, to me, is such an important one, because we can rationalize in our own minds about, oh, this is important to do or that's important to do. But really, is it necessary? Is it one of the things that really must be done in order to reach our goals? And then what's the most powerful action I can take right now? So throughout the day, we're evaluating whether or not we're really on track with those important things. And one of the things I learned, actually, while I was out in Las Vegas, Larry, at that workshop with James Malinchak, he mentioned that he writes down on just a scrap piece of paper every day the 3 things that he must get done that day. And after he has completed them, he throws that piece of paper away because they're done. But that helps him stay focused. And I've used that myself. What are my top 3 things that have to get done today, no matter what? And then the other things that sometimes I would have given priority to get shuffled to be done later, if at all, that day, because they don't count as much. So I'm a work in progress with this one.
We all are.
The next one is another good one. This idea of making a commitment versus trying. And he has a separate chapter in there on being an owner versus a victim. And to me, these are both related, because when you don't take as much responsibility for your own actions and your own time and your own control, really, of your life, you can say, well, I'll try to do that. And that really is putting yourself more in the victim role. Whereas, again, this definition he has of committing, when you commit, you make a promise to do whatever is required to get the results. And you're making that commitment sometimes just to yourself, but it can be even more powerful when you make that commitment to others too, because then you're going public with it. So the questions, some of them related to this, are what new commitments do I need to create to get the future I choose? And throughout this book, he really uses the word create rather than identifying yourself with a particular personality, let's say. Well, I'm this way, so that's why I don't want to do that. Well, it's a choice, how you are going to be in any given moment. Mm-hmm. And so the idea we can recreate ourselves every day is another theme that runs through the book, which is empowering and freeing, because then you're not stuck in old patterns. You can make a new choice for this minute or for this day, whatever you need to do in order to accomplish what it is you've set out to do. And then the other question is, what results will I produce as a measure of my commitment, so that I'm not, I've got something to quantify at the end of the day, at the end of the hour, whatever the time frame is that you want to do the measuring. Am I staying on task during this 60 minutes, or am I getting distracted? It's these little things that if we can find a way to measure them, then we know whether we've actually accomplished it or not. So that's another one I love. And then the shoulds versus musts. And we've all been in the people business for a long time, so we know how it can be judgmental to say should, but still within ourselves, sometimes our dialogue with ourselves is, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, or I should be doing that. But it's also a way that we're trying to live up to other people's expectations. And I really like the use of the word must, because in terms of what you want to accomplish, when you look at what must be done to achieve the results, I like this idea of a must-do list every day, which is in that quote that I have at the bottom. Again, it's about creating yourself, and when you operate from a must-do list every day, it helps you get better results. And he talks in one of the chapters, about the fact that you don't have to like these things that you must do. You just have to recognize that's what's required if you really are serious about getting the results you want to get, whether it's a financial goal or some other goal about your life. It could be a weight loss goal, it could be an exercise goal, whatever it is. You have to see it as, this is something I must do every day. And it has a different feel to it than the word should. Does it feel different when you kind of say that word in your own head? Should versus must?
Yeah.
I think what it does for me anyway.
And for me.
I want to say something because this is related to a couple of blogs that I've written over the last 6 months or whatever. One of them is, what's your flake rate? Because as you know, Camille and I do some volunteering with political campaigns. And political campaigns have something called the flake rate, and that's the number of people who show up versus the ones that say they're going to be there on Sunday at 2.
Yes.
Okay? And they can tell sometimes by the way somebody commits to Sunday at 2, the way their voice is and all that sort of stuff, that they're saying yes, but they mean maybe, and the flake rate is going to be very high. So one of my blogs has to do with what's your flake rate, and it talks about, how do you show up and what is a real commitment and all that. And the other thing that we do is we have our students, because we work with college students with ADHD and whatever. We have them fill out a shared Google Calendar of when they're going to study for each course and when they're going to take their meds and when they're going to do this. And at the end of the day, they go back and they convert it to a journal. So you intended to do these things in these hours. How many of them did you do? And if you did something else, was that better and required, or was that a distraction that kept you from?
Oh, perfect. That's a great tie-in to this.
So a lot of people are not conscious at all about where their time goes.
Right.
All they know is they still haven't read that chapter, or they're still not ready for the test. But
yes. And one of the things in a work day that you could do is, set yourself up with a calendar in 15-minute increments. And every 15 minutes, you can record what it is you've done during that 15-minute period, or whatever block of time makes sense for you. But that way you're monitoring your own productivity too. So it's similar to what you're doing with the students. That's great.
Yeah.
That's very good. Very concrete for them. And for us. Now, this chapter to me is just an amazing one from the perspective of a coach or consultant working with clients, because he actually, you can see pleasing them versus trying, to do everything you can to make them happy, versus serving them, where you ask them questions and you tell them the truth about things they need to hear, whether you think they're going to welcome it with open arms or not. So this is probably the longest chapter in the book, and he has a bunch of questions that he asks a prospective client who contacts him about his services. And so these are just a couple that he asks, but I will send this PDF to you after the call so that you can go deeper. With this one chapter alone, it would be an excellent use of your time. I love this first question though. This is really good for someone, who's new to you, that I've done a version of this for people I've met on LinkedIn, and we're having our first conversation. And, I'd like to know, what is it they're hoping to get from the call? what would make, and so I like the idea of the word amazingly useful, because that kind of kicks it up a notch to another level. What, when they hang up, what would cause them to say, man, I'm glad I talked to this person because it was so valuable. So asking them that up front is extremely useful for you to know, what are their expectations? What are their hopes with this conversation, so that basically how to guide it. And once you start asking some other questions to help you find out, what's the opportunity here for me to help them, then getting into some of these questions to help them identify what the real issue might be. And just like the question I asked earlier, you had to think about it. That's what's going to happen when you ask really powerful questions to people, especially prospective clients that you might not know well. How to set yourself apart is asking them to think of the answers to questions that maybe nobody else has ever asked them, or they simply haven't considered before, and being willing to be quiet while they have time to think about it and not be uncomfortable with the silence. Because if you really give them the opportunity to think about the answer, there's some amazing things you can learn that will help you then ask follow-up questions and get a better sense of where your services may fit in best with what they're struggling with. So the smaller font shows some additional questions you can get at related to uncovering the real issue, to get them talking about, what's working, whether it's, their current training programs or assessment programs or coaching they've had in the past or training they've had, what's working or what has worked, what's not working now, basically what's missing, and why are you looking for something else or something in addition to what you have, and get them talking about, ideally, what would it look like if, you were a year from now, and we were having this conversation, what would have needed to change for you to feel like your company, your department is in a much better place. Mm-hmm. And that will often get them going deeper than some, superficial answer that may or may not really be getting at the real crux of the issue.
That's a good question. I like that. What would make this conversation amazingly useful? I think the word amazingly is overused, so I would use a different word there. But question otherwise.
Yeah. Well, even, whatever is a natural way of talking for you, because you definitely want it to sound like you. Mm-hmm. So, even valuable, what are you hoping to get from this conversation? It would be whatever way makes sense from your perspective, because of course context matters. Mm-hmm. And what led up to the conversation, and what's happened, how you set it up in the first place, how you met the person, all of that weighs into what you would ask them up front. That's a good point.
And I bet most prospective clients don't hear that question often, if at all.
No. Typically the person, if it's anyone in sales that, or somebody that has an offering, they're expecting to get hit with, product information or services information. So to have the, spotlight turned on them to find out what would be valuable for them is huge. Nobody does that. So it would be a way of setting yourself apart also.
Yeah.
Mm.
Any other thoughts or comments about that?
I'm just interested. So just what Larry was saying, that, the word amazingly is overused. I don't know if this is the, that little pond in between us, because it's sort of like that's an adjective we don't often use over here. I'm just wondering what other words do you use instead? I'm saying Larry just because you mentioned that if it's overused. What other kind of words would you use?
I would use a word there, I think, Graham, like genuinely. what would make this conversation genuinely useful to you?
Yeah.
Or of value. Those are a couple that come to mind.
Yeah.
Instead of just another sales conversation from another prospective provider, I think I would lean toward those choices of words. What about you?
Yes. I suppose I said we don't get into this sort of over here using things like amazing or wow,
Awesome, yeah,
awesome and things. But when you do, there's always like a sort of someone like it's almost like someone's catching their breath. Oh no, hey, you're speaking with the wrong accent to use those kind of words. So, so yeah, I think we're probably a little more. I don't know what the word is, plain in our usage, but yeah, genuine of value and thing I think is good to that. Sorry, Meredith.
No, low key is what I was thinking.
Yeah, we're not.
Meredith, I want you to know that I'm on my phone. My computer, it said your computer has run into a problem that makes it want to have to shut down or something like that.
Oh, no problem.
So that's why I'm not on Zoom anymore. I'm on the phone now.
That's all right.
We can hear you.
The other thing, just other ways of getting at some of this. If they call you to say, what was it that prompted you to call today? What's happening? What kind of things are you looking for that you think I might be able to help you with? So there's a lot of different ways of getting at the same thing. What you're really looking at is, what is it? Where's their pain? What are they trying to relieve in terms of a situation that's happening with them? Because a lot of times no one else has asked them that either. And so to ask a non-threatening question that encourages them to open up is the general principle there. And so whatever it is that feels comfortable to you, that would be genuine for you, I think is really important. Because you're right, you don't want to come across as one more salesperson that they have to contend with. So this is one of my favorite quotes from this book that really gets at the overall purpose of the book. It's not life's conditions, but the inner stances that you operate out of that shape your destiny. And so when you think about what stances, do I take that really get in the way of me accomplishing what I hope to, then that's the kind of thing, because you can jump around in these chapters, by the way. You don't have to cover them in any particular sequence. The opening chapters explain the idea of stances and the contrasts that he sets up. But I'll give you a quick example before we close, because I know we're right at the end of our time together. In one chapter, he talks about a fellow that's a consultant who was struggling with his business. He had excellent expertise. He got really good results. When he worked with clients, he just didn't have enough clients. So Dusan had him take out his calendar. And he said, okay, where are the places that you've set aside for sales conversations with decision makers who can hire you? He didn't have any. He wasn't blocking time to have conversations with people who could say yes to hiring him. So he started realizing the things it was a whole thing of busy versus productive. He had been working on his website, tweaking this, modifying that, but he was avoiding doing the one thing that would be most likely to get him business, which was talking to people who had problems that he could help solve. So I think that's really the key. And so once he recognized that and saw how he was sabotaging himself, he started blocking time every day. That was his number one priority. So I don't know the methods he used, if he went on LinkedIn to meet people or went to networking events locally, but he started finding people that he could have conversations with, and those led to him getting more consulting gigs. So it's really being honest with yourself. In fact, I think that's the chapter he's in, the radical self-honesty versus being insincere. So he was willing to take a look at himself and what he was doing to undermine him getting the results that he really wanted. So I'll leave you with that thought. And for those of you that don't, Larry, I think I had sent you the book, right? Did you get that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So Graham and Dennis, I will send you that.
Yes, please. Look forward to it.
We'll have that, and I think you'll find it extremely valuable. Any closing comments or questions?
I'd just like to make a comment for Larry, and that's that 15 years ago I lost my wife and business partner, and I had to sort of reinvent myself after that, because it was one thing to have lost a wife of 33 years. There was another thing. All of a sudden I found out, hey, you know, half of my business is gone because people used to call and say, can either you or Diane do this, you know, because she had worked with me for 20 years. So it's a little bit behind me, and I've since remarried and I have another business partner and so forth. But if you ever want to just chat about that, you know, how do I move from here to there? I'm always available.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that.
Okay.
I would like to take you up on that.
All right.
I'll send you each other's contact information.
Okay.
I think I still have Dennis's from when we met at Habitat, unless it's changed.
Yeah. No, it has not changed.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yep.
All right. I'll let you take it from here then. Well, thank you all for being here. I hope you found this useful. I won't say amazingly useful.
I found it amazingly useful. So thank you very much. I'm a Brit who doesn't mind using these sort of, you know, these nice wild adjectives. They're great for me.
Well, thank you all, and I'll look forward to hearing from you as you implement some of these ideas.
Okay, thanks again.